one of the few people in this room that has had the privilege of knowing George Harold Olson my whole life. There's a few of you here. In fact, can I get just a show of hands of people who are related to Daryl one way or another? Everybody here today? There are a lot of people that traveled a long way to here, and there are more that would have traveled if they could have made it. And that's a testament. A good friend of mine said, "Leave it to your dad to put funner in a funeral," but he did. This is the kind of event that you would like to have attended. There's ham and shrimp, and that was my dad. Pretty much ham and shrimp my whole life. And there's one cocktail sauce ran out like every Olson party. Just a couple of things I'd like to do to point a spotlight toward my dad. Something unique vantage point. I think everyone here has their favorite stories or their favorite memories. I have a few things that you can talk about. Remember a robbery? Where they took everything. 4 men came in, tied up my sister, hit my dad with a gun, took everything. And I mean everything. I remember coming home from school and thinking, so what do we do when they take everything? And you know what Daryl said? We're going to Lake Powell. So we loaded up our motorhome that sometimes worked, and we loaded a boat onto the back of the motorhome, and we threw in a bunch of fruit, because that's what Dad ate. He ate a lot of fruit. And we drove up to Lake Powell. And we couldn't put the boat in the water, because the conditions were just too bad. So we said, we're going to ski anyway. So we went to Lee's Ferry. We put the boat in the water. And the water's about 34 degrees at Lee's Ferry. But he wanted a water ski. Because, you know, when you lose everything, what matters? Water skiing, being with your family, doing some fun things. Well, as we put the boat in the water, the park rangers approached us and let us know that there had been a tragedy the night before. 2 young servicemen from the Air Force had their boat overturned in a storm that was still blowing over Lake Powell, and they drowned. And they wanted everybody who could to help search for bodies. And so that's what he did. He drugged the river. Because all we had was lost everything. They'd lost their lives. And he wanted their feelings to have them back. Never seen a body before. He had his scuba mask on. I've seen pictures of him in his scuba mask. He thought he was Lloyd Bridges. He broke all the rules when the scuba dived. Another story for another day, but he kept his face in that ice cold water for hours. He found it. It was very, very solemn to be able to restore the remains for that family. We brought him onto the boat, and we covered him in the boat tarp. All of a sudden, losing everything didn't really mean all that much. That was Daryl. So we started over. Started again. I can't tell you how many times we were robbed, how many times tragedy hit. Everybody has their own share. But Daryl's share of challenges started. You may not know, and I'm going to give just a Reader's Digest version of events that shaped Dad when he was a little boy. And his sister's here with us today. She was quite young. But his father was a jewelry salesman. He traveled all over the western U.S. and was gone for weeks at a time. And he said that his dad was a lot of fun, and his dad was an athlete. His dad did so many fun things. And what my dad ended up bringing to me was the bowling pin that had been his special treasure that was his father's when he bowled his first 300 games. And I've got that in my living room next to his bowling ball. When Dad was 7, the man who was running for office in Idaho took my grandfather's life to steal his jewelry. And left 3 little children in Salt Lake. And Dad went to work. By the time he was a young teenager, he was working in the jewelry store where his father had worked. Doing all he could to help his family, his 2 sisters, his mother. As a child, I remember asking my father once, what was it like to know that someone had murdered your father? Because I couldn't comprehend that. It was so foreign to me. And he looked at me and said, you know, I don't think about him because I forgave him a long time ago. You forgave him? And he said, yeah. He wasn't going to do the prison time that someone else deserved by holding on to anger or hatred. You're always kind. He lived the scout law. Some of you don't know that he was very much into scouting, but he didn't show up to all the meetings. His cousin would go sneaking up the canyon and go skiing and do other things because he liked to explore. He liked to travel. As children, he taught us the map game. He would pull out an atlas and say, okay, let's plan a trip. And we planned trips to everywhere. Well, eventually he took most of those trips. And many of his family members went with him on those trips because he loved to learn. He was one of the most intelligent people that I've ever met. He could carry on a conversation with you just about anything, about any subject. He was an athlete, but because of circumstances in his life, he didn't get to participate in high school athletics. So I had to, and that was kind of just going to happen. And so, at 128 pounds, he wanted me to play linebacker for Camelback High School Spartans. I thought, it sounds good to me. But after 3 trips to the emergency room in about 3 consecutive weeks, I thought that career might not have much of a promise. But he would not let me quit. I wasn't that good, but he wouldn't let me quit. Many times in my life, when things were challenging, he would not let me quit. Dad believed that we could do hard things because he had already done hard things. He had overcome a lot of hard things. And he wanted us to overcome hard things. Because he was a young boy when his father died, he became a big brother to many men. And a father to many, many people. He loves. He loved. And he had a great capacity to express that love. And he was generous to a fault. I don't think he ever saw a check that he couldn't pick up. That's just who he was. He wanted to make sure everybody was enjoying themselves, that they felt important, that they felt valued. And that was a trait that wore off on most of us. That idea of it's always good to be of service to others. We had more exchange students poured through our house over the years than I think there are countries in the world today. Every summer there was somebody from Brazil or Japan or Italy or someplace, and they were coming through, and we didn't know that that was an education, that he wanted us to understand that our world was bigger than making those friendships, we could understand, we could be kinder, because Dad was kind. Dad was an incredibly spiritual man. I have with me a certificate for when he was a baby and when he was blessed as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And years later, he was ordained an elder in that church. When I was a young boy, I suffered from terrible ear infections. Now, this is the 60s. You didn't go to the doctor unless something had fallen off and you needed to get sewn back on. And so he told me that through the priesthood authority that he held, he could give blessings of healing to the sick and the afflicted. Well, I guess that counted because at 4 years old, in excruciating pain, I found my way into his room, and I woke him up, and he looked at me, rolled to the side of the bed, put his hands on my head, and said, "Son, in the name of Jesus Christ, I heal you." Not that eloquent. It changed my life. The pain was not immediate. He had gifts, and he was a spiritual man, and he loved, and he forgave. And what kind of legacy is that? I think that's the best kind of legacy. I don't know that it's what we leave behind, but what we help everyone to remember and hold on to for the rest of our lives. Just before he passed away, what we now humorously refer to as the farewell trip, or the farewell tour, he threw his dogs in the car because Bonnie left him unattended and went to Chicago. And you can't leave Daryl unattended very long because he's got wanderers. And he drove to Vegas at 90 with his dogs. And when he showed up at my door and said, "Dad, you drove across the desert? What if you had a flat tire?" And he said, "But I didn't." And we got to spend the weekend, and he got to see his grandchildren that were far away, and a new great-grandchild, and he just got to play with his dogs in the backyard and watch animals, and he was at peace. As hard as it is for us to let go momentarily of a really, really good man, he had lived his life. He had given more than he had taken. He had left this planet better, generous. Many years ago, as I was preparing to spend 2 years in Brazil, I was flying to LA with a group of young missionaries, 19 years old, and he flew to LA because he wanted to say goodbye one more time. Because 2 years is a long time to be away from what you love. And he showed up, and he came up to this group, and I didn't know he was going to be there. And I got to hug him, and was so pleased to see him. He was so considerate to do that. It wasn't easy to jump on a plane and go in. And he said, "Hey, you all look like you need to eat. Why don't we go to this room in LA, this place in the LA airport? It's a buffet. And why don't you go all eat?" Now, back in those days, a buffet was kind of a special thing. And it was like $20 a head to go in. And I was doing the math. I was like, what? Yeah, there's like 15 of us. And he's like, "Yeah, and you're all going to be gone for 2 years." Fast forward about 35 years. One of those young men who I worked with in some of the craziest places in Brazil you could ever find on the map, had a big conference, a big reunion for people who had served together. And it was at this very beautiful estate in central Utah, very sprawling ranch. He'd done very, very well for himself. He had started an international adoption agency for children who had been orphaned in Russia because of the Chechen War, and he just had done some really amazing things. He pulled me aside when I got there. He said, I have to tell you, all these things are good. Be careful with that. And I didn't even know what he was referring to. He said, do you remember he took us to that crazy expensive buffet in Los Angeles? I had never seen anybody be spontaneously kind to a stranger before. I'd never seen that. And I wanted to be that man. I thank him for sharing that information. He says, no, you don't know how much that changed me. I think all of us probably have a story or two of things that Daryl did over the years that changed us. We're going to hold on to those and keep them special. We're going to pass them along. And he loves his family. He loves his grandchildren. If we could put a big tarp up here, we actually have one from the family reunion we organized 2 years ago. And we put our family tree up, and there were a lot of branches. And there's a lot of acorns that have fallen from that oak tree. And now we're working on great grandchildren's the next list there, and he just loved to be at every single event that he could. He would drive through the night to get there. He loved to be at every one of his children or grandchildren's events. Because that's how he showed how much he loved and supported. He believed we can do hard things. Last hard thing I watched him do, surrounded by many of the people who love him in this ICU. COVID restrictions had lifted just long enough to allow us to gather. He was intubated, wasn't very conscious. There are many of his family members who are in the healing arts. Doctors, nurses. We wanted to save him. But he was at peace. He was surrounded by people who loved him. And so he surrounded that bed and had a very special prayer. And everyone had a chance to put their arms around him one more time. And he left his life. But he's not gone. He's not a pile of ashes. The bling came. I will always laugh about that. It's on my screensaver. He was holding my granddaughter with his cane. He designed one like that for Evil Knievel, by the way. That's what probably killed Evil Knievel. But he loved doing those kinds of things. It reminded me a little bit of James Bond. And also St. Francis of Assisi. He loved animals. He loved people. Let me just leave you with this one last thought. I don't know of too many people who have a standing room only celebration of life. And I know this. And I know this personally. When he stepped through that veil of mortality and left his body behind, I know that my grandfather was there to receive him. So was my grandmother. His great legacy is the ability to love and form families. I hope you all feel like a part of that family. It's fun to listen to your conversations. Everybody's got a great story. Dad was loved by his kids. He taught us so many great things. And that legacy will continue. Thank you.